Millionaire CEO sees his ex-wife working as waitress. He approaches and does something no one saw coming. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Ellie Parker balanced a tray of steaming cappuccinos as the scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the daily grind. The cafe's rustic wooden tables and mismatched chairs offered a certain charm to the bohemian streets of Fremont, one of Seattle's most creative corners. At 40, Ellie relished the quiet busyness of her work. Her close-cropped hair was pulled into a casual ponytail, and she wore a comfortable, faded green apron that matched the shop's earthy vibe. Every morning began with the hiss of the espresso machine, the hum of relaxed chatter, and the daily jokes from regular customers who found her warm smile reassuring. People ambled in with laptops to write poems or caught up with friends, the bustle never reaching the sterile rush of the corporate world. That was precisely what Ellie loved most about this place, its soft edges and welcoming glow. By the front counter, Martha, owner of the Daily Grind, adjusted the chalkboard menu. She was in her early 60s, with silver hair twisted into a loose bun. Whenever Martha glanced at Ellie, there was the hint of a protective warmth in her eyes. Ellie often suspected Martha saw beyond her polite greetings and recognized a woman both comforted by and wary of her simple new life. "Ellie, sweetheart, don't forget to breathe," Martha said, her voice carrying over the hiss of the espresso machine. "You've been racing around non-stop since opening." Ellie offered a soft laugh as she served a latte to a college student hunched over textbooks. "I'm good, Martha. Honestly, keeping busy helps." But in the back of her mind, Ellie knew this peace she clung to so tightly was carefully constructed over the past few years. She appreciated the swirl of everyday tasks, greeting new customers, wiping tables, double-checking orders. It was a shield she held up to keep her thoughts from drifting too far into the past. Occasionally, a flicker of memory would intrude. High-end soirees in glass towers downtown, the incessant chime of phone alerts about mergers and acquisitions, the relentless feeling that she was an accessory to someone else's life. That was her old world, the one she deliberately walked away from 5 years ago. Now, after the divorce from Benjamin Gray, the famed CEO of a major tech corporation, she cherished simplicity as if it were the most precious commodity. Martha noticed Ellie's brief distraction and gently tapped her on the shoulder. "You okay, dear?" "I'm fine," Ellie responded, breathing in the comforting aroma of roasted beans. She managed a reassuring nod. "Just thinking about how grateful I am to be here." Fremont's creative spirit supported Ellie in ways she never anticipated. On her days off, she immersed herself in ceramics at a small community studio called Living Earth, a space that welcomed budding artists from all backgrounds. Whenever the whir of the potter's wheel met her hands, Ellie felt a soft hum of calm in her chest. She shaped clay into bowls, mugs, and vases, any form that emerged naturally. There was something liberating about taking raw earth and molding it into a vessel of her own design. Still, beneath this newfound contentment, a faint sense of emptiness lingered. It crept in when the cafe was quiet, when the last customers left and the lights dimmed. Some nights, as Ellie cleaned the counters, she heard echoes of her old life, hushed arguments behind penthouse doors, the insistent demands of social events she never wanted to attend, and above all, the quiet heartbreak of being overshadowed by Benjamin's ambitions. Through the large front window, rain clouds gathered in the grey Seattle sky. Ellie pressed her palm against the cool glass, exhaling slowly. Was this modest existence truly enough to keep her fulfilled forever? She couldn't be sure, yet each day she decided to stay. It felt safer to remain in a steady routine than to explore the uncharted territory of her lingering regrets. When a new flurry of customers arrived, Ellie straightened and forced a smile. As the door's little bell chimed, she reminded herself that this gentle, ordinary life was her choice, one she needed to believe in, for now. She welcomed the new patrons, notebook ready to jot down orders. Outside, the distant rumble of thunder hinted that change might soon blow in with the storm. Ellie had no idea that the life she tried so hard to keep at bay would soon come calling, challenging everything she thought she wanted, everything she believed she'd left behind. The next morning, Ellie awoke to the faint drizzle tapping against her bedroom window, the comforting Seattle soundtrack she'd grown accustomed to. She made her way to the daily grind slightly earlier than usual, hoping to sort out inventory and enjoy a quiet cup of coffee before the morning rush. Her early start was derailed by the ringtone of her phone echoing in the still-closed cafe. When she picked up, Liam's voice came through in an urgent whisper. "Ellie, you won't believe the rumors I'm hearing. They're saying our building at Living Earth might be sold in a few months, some big developer deal." Her stomach clenched. "That can't be right," she said, already feeling a wave of unease flood her. "Who'd want to evict a community art studio? Living Earth is barely known outside this neighborhood." "That's exactly why I'm worried," Liam replied, frustration lacing his words. "Small places like ours often become the first to be pushed out. I need to talk to you in person. Can you meet me later at the studio?" "I'll be there," Ellie agreed, her mind racing. She hung up, eyebrows furrowed. Martha found her by the cash register, wearing a troubled expression. "What's going on?" the older woman asked gently, flicking on the lights above the pastry display. Ellie relayed Liam's call, explaining the threat to Living Earth. Martha pursed her lips in sympathy. "This city keeps growing, sweetheart. Investors only see dollar signs when they look at neighborhoods like Fremont these days." "I can't let them force us out," Ellie insisted, pressing a hand to her chest as if to steady her pulse. "That place. It's the one thing that gave me a sense of belonging after everything." Martha nodded thoughtfully, placing a comforting hand on Ellie's shoulder. "You and Liam will figure something out. Maybe hold a community meeting, rally local support." The idea calmed Ellie slightly. She forced a shaky smile, then inhaled the deep, rich aroma of fresh coffee grounds, a small anchor in her sea of swirling thoughts. "I'll talk to him," she promised. As the morning progressed, the cafe doors swung open in a steady rhythm. Ellie tried focusing on customer orders, but her attention drifted to the unsettling news. Between serving lattes and scones, she glanced frequently at the clock, eager for her shift to end so she could dash over to Living Earth. Several regulars, noticing her distraction, asked if she was all right. Ellie offered polite nods and gentle reassurances, yet inside she felt that protective bubble of peace slipping away. Danger had a way of creeping up on her whenever she began to feel safe, an unfortunate pattern she recognized from her past. Finally, the clock struck noon, and Martha waved Ellie off. "Go on, get out of here. I can handle lunch on my own. You've got a bigger battle to fight." Ellie murmured her thanks, quickly shedding her apron and grabbing her worn denim jacket from a hook in the back. She braved the light rain, weaving past the busy sidewalk traffic that included day trippers and bohemian artists scouring second-hand bookstores. Under her breath, she rehearsed what she'd say to Liam. When Ellie arrived at Living Earth, a wave of familiarity and comfort momentarily soothed her. The large windows revealed rows of colorful pottery and clay sculptures on dusty shelves. Inside, the faint smell of wet clay and paint felt like home. Yet, the anxious faces of the few gathered artists told her this wasn't a normal day. Liam hurried over, his long hair tied back, specks of paint on his sleeves. "There's so much uncertainty," he said, voice quivering with worry. "We heard a big tech company's behind the purchase, or maybe an affiliate." Hearing the phrase "big tech company" made Ellie's heart lurch. Though she immediately shoved aside the unwanted flash of memory, Benjamin Gray's polished silhouette and the world she'd abandoned. "Let's sit down and figure out a plan," she said, forcing determination into her tone. The time had come to brace herself for whatever storms threatened the fragile security she'd found. The ceramic workshop was eerily quiet, aside from the constant drip of water hitting a tin bucket near the back door. Liam perched on a stool, elbows on his knees, glancing anxiously at Ellie. She brushed damp strands of hair from her face, feeling the cold linger in her fingertips despite the shelter of the studio. They had assembled a few other artists who used living earth regularly. Worn clay tools, half-finished sculptures, and splashes of paint on the concrete floor bore silent witness to the group's hushed conversation. Everyone was worried. "We can petition," suggested Dawn, a soft-spoken painter. "We can reach out to the local news. They've covered arts initiatives around here before." Ellie pressed her lips together, nodding. "That might help get attention, but we'll need more than just coverage. We need funds, or at least an investor willing to protect this space." Liam gave her a pointed look. "Could you maybe contact anyone from your old life?" He paused, as if uncertain whether it was polite to say, "I don't know much, but you mentioned your ex-husband was powerful in the tech world. Could he?" "No," Ellie cut him off, her voice sharper than she intended. She swallowed and softened her tone. "Benjamin and I, we haven't spoken in years. Even if I wanted to, I doubt he'd step in just because I asked." A fleeting image of those glitzy galas and boardrooms she once inhabited swirled in her mind. She remembered feeling like a ghost in designer heels, surrounded by technology moguls discussing million-dollar deals. The thought of re-entering that realm made her hands clammy. Liam sighed, looking apologetic. "Sorry, I'm desperate. We all are." Ellie placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "I know. We'll find a way. We can't let them evict us. I need to think about how we proceed next." As the small meeting dispersed, Ellie remained behind, her gaze fixed on a half-finished ceramic vase. She trailed a fingertip across its rough surface, recalling the loneliness she endured in a marriage defined by missed dinners and rescheduled anniversaries. She had fled from that hollow life, building her sanctuary here in Fremont, where no one measured her worth by social status or net worth. She heard rain intensify outside, a reminder of Seattle's persistent drizzle. It drummed on the windows, matching the unease in her chest. If Living Earth was forced to close, she'd lose not only her creative outlet, but also the anchor that kept her from drifting back into a life of emptiness. Her phone buzzed. She tugged it from her jacket pocket, half expecting a text from Martha or a spam promotion. Instead, the local news app lit up the screen. Innovatech Solutions named potential backer in major Fremont real estate project. Instantly, Ellie felt her stomach drop. She skimmed the brief article, vague mentions of a possible deal between Innovatech Solutions and a property developer, details still unknown. But Innovatech Solutions, that was Benjamin Gray's empire. She sank onto a nearby stool, pulse pounding in her ears. Could it be mere coincidence, or was he directly involved? The memory of her ex-husband's sharp grey suits and confident stride collided with her present reality. 5 years of divorce had passed, and she'd made every effort to avoid crossing paths with him or his corporate sphere. A wave of nausea hit as she imagined Benjamin at a conference table, casually signing documents that would displace her and every artist who breathed life into Living Earth. Yet, part of her also felt a deep ache, recalling how he once admired her passion for creativity, even if he seldom showed it in any tangible way. She quickly shut off the phone, rubbing her temples. "Don't jump to conclusions," she whispered to herself. "You don't know if he's directly part of this. Yet, The mere possibility that Benjamin Gray and the unstoppable force of his tech empire could be behind the pending sale sent a cold jolt of anxiety straight through her. She wasn't ready to face him again. But if he truly stood in the path of saving living Earth, she knew there'd be no way to avoid that confrontation. Late afternoon brought thicker clouds, and by early evening, a downpour had turned the streets glossy under the dimming light. Ellie stepped off the bus near the daily grind, water splashing her boots as she hurried under the canopy. Fremont's quirky storefronts glistened in the rain, neon signs reflecting off puddles. Inside the cafe, warm overhead lights greeted her. Martha looked up from wiping the counter, concern etched on her face. "You're soaked, darling." "Grab a towel from the back." Ellie nodded, shivering slightly. She returned moments later, hair damp and eyes distant. Martha poured her a cup of chamomile tea. "Sit," she insisted, motioning to a stool by the counter. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Sighing, Ellie recounted the day's revelations, the rumored sale of Living Earth, the potential link to Innovatech Solutions, and her rising dread that Benjamin might be entangled in all of it. Martha listened, brow furrowed. After a moment of thoughtful silence, Martha said, "Sometimes a storm has to blow through before you find clarity. Don't let fear keep you from defending what matters. If that atelier means so much, you'll have to stand your ground, even if it means facing your ex." Ellie wrapped her hands around the warm mug. The soft steam on her cheeks felt like a small kindness in an otherwise harsh day. I don't know if I'm strong enough," she murmured. "Every time I think of Benjamin, I'm reminded of how powerless I used to feel." "Used to?" Martha emphasized. "You're not that same woman. You took control of your life when you walked away. Now, if you want to keep Living Earth safe, you must do it again, on your terms." Outside, sheets of rain pounded the windows, a rhythmic patter that seemed to mirror Ellie's thudding heartbeat. She stared at the rivulets streaking the glass, remembering nights in a penthouse suite where rain blurred the city skyline, leaving her feeling trapped and lonely despite the luxury. She took a long sip of tea. "You're right," she said softly, meeting Martha's gaze. "Running away won't solve anything. I owe it to myself and everyone else who relies on that studio." Martha's expression held encouragement, and a gentle smile touched her lips. "That's the Ellie I know." Before closing, a few late customers wandered in, seeking shelter from the storm. Ellie busied herself wiping tables and stacking chairs, her mind a mix of determination and lingering dread. Could Benjamin truly be the unstoppable force behind the developer threatening Living Earth? What if he didn't even realize she was connected to the place? Worse, what if he did know and was indifferent to her feelings? When the doors finally shut for the night, she and Martha locked up. Outside, the sky grumbled with distant thunder, and gusts of wind rattled the overhead sign. "Do you need a ride?" Martha offered, eyeing the dark, rain-swept road. Ellie shook her head. "I'll walk. The air might clear my mind." Pulling up her hood, she ventured out, the chill of the rain seeping into her bones. Each step echoed on the slick pavement, and her reflection caught in puddles seemed ghostly under the faint streetlights. She thought about her plan. Talk to Liam, organize a meeting for the artists, maybe gather petitions. They could approach local businesses or hold a fundraising event at the daily grind. She tightened her jaw as droplets slid down her cheeks, indistinguishable from tears she refused to release. She'd come too far to be thrown back into the vortex of her former life without a fight. That night, as she finally stepped into her small apartment, Ellie realized the comforting simplicity of her routines might soon be uprooted. No matter how much she dreaded conflict, it was heading toward her like storm clouds, and if Benjamin Gray truly stood on the other side of that storm, she braced herself for the possibility that confronting him would be inevitable. The next day arrived with a calmer sky, though Ellie sensed the underlying tension that lingered as surely as the residual dampness on the Seattle sidewalks. She finished her morning shift at the Daily Grind, taking deliberate care as she prepared cappuccinos and chai lattes for her customers. Despite her anxious thoughts, she managed a polite smile for every order. Just after lunchtime, Martha approached Ellie with a small notepad in hand. "You've got the weekend shifts covered, so if you need to cut out early and handle everything at Living Earth, I can spare you." Ellie hesitated, the notion of stepping away from her protective bubble making her heart flutter. "Are you sure? I don't want to leave you in a lurch." Martha waved off the concern. "This is important, Ellie. Go on. Set up whatever you need for the atelier. I'll be just fine here." With that gentle push, Ellie untied her apron and tucked it beneath the counter. The world outside felt oddly bright after the past day's gloom, sunlight now piercing through scattered clouds. She walked toward Living Earth with renewed purpose, passing by colorful murals on building walls and hearing snippets of buskers' tunes drifting through the air. It all reminded her of what was at stake: the vibrant, creative soul of Fremont, her refuge. When she arrived, Liam was already inside, sorting through papers, spreadsheets, and sketches. The studio's chaos of half-formed clay pieces and splattered paints appeared even more hectic today. "Thank God you're here," he said, exhaling in relief. "I've been trying to work out a financial estimate, but we'd need more funds than we can imagine just to compete with a big developer." Ellie pulled a few chairs together, beckoning him to sit. "We'll have to get creative. Maybe a fundraising event, an open house, inviting the community to buy our artwork or sponsor memberships." Liam's eyes lit up. A silent auction could work. Combine that with local musicians, food, that might draw enough attention to our cause. They spent the next hour brainstorming details. Ellie jotted ideas in a battered notebook, everything from raffle prizes to local press invitations. Each new thought brought a surge of energy, but beneath it all, she felt the creeping dread of a more personal threat. She closed the notebook and glanced at Liam. "We have to be ready if someone tries to overshadow our efforts." Her voice wavered when she added, "Especially if Innovatech is involved. They could buy out the property with spare change from their marketing budget. We can't outbid them." "Then we have to gather public support," Liam answered. "If enough people rally behind us, maybe the developer won't risk a PR disaster." Ellie nodded, though part of her mind wandered to Benjamin. Would he push this forward behind closed doors, ignoring the harm to the atelier? Or was there a chance he'd intervene to help? The questions tugged at her relentlessly, but she couldn't bear to bring them up to Liam again. They worked late into the afternoon, creating a preliminary outline for the fundraiser. By the time they finished, dusk had begun to soften the daylight, and Living Earth felt strangely peaceful, as if the clay and paint dust held its breath for what came next. Ellie gathered her notes, standing by the large front window overlooking Fremont's eclectic shops. In the fading light, she caught a glimpse of her own reflection superimposed on the street scene, someone who had once been hidden in the shadow of a powerful figure. Now, she was stepping into a role she never expected, leading a charge to save a place that symbolized her own rebirth. "I'll start reaching out to local businesses tomorrow," she said quietly, turning to Liam. "Let's make flyers, and I'll see if Martha will let us host a small preview event at the Daily Grind." He smiled, though worry still creased his brow. "We can do this. We just have to stay focused." Ellie placed the notebook into her bag. As she locked the studio's door behind them, she felt an unsteady mixture of fear and resolve. Her heart pounded with the knowledge that she was about to challenge forces far larger than she'd ever faced alone. But for the first time in a long while, she wouldn't simply vanish into the safety of her routine. She would fight, not just for living Earth, but for the part of herself she'd discovered within these walls. And if that meant putting a foot into the unknown, Ellie was finally ready to do it. Ellie slipped into the daily grind on a brisk Wednesday morning, anxious to share her latest progress on the fundraiser with Martha. The cafe had just opened, and the early customers, mostly silent, bleary-eyed people in need of caffeine, took their usual seats. Ellie settled behind the counter and began restocking cups and lids. She hadn't slept well, her mind circling around living Earth's uncertain fate. A few minutes later, Martha emerged from the back room with a gentle smile. "Morning, dear," she greeted, tying her apron. "Why don't you have a seat for a moment? Looks like you have a lot on your mind." Ellie hesitated. The lull in business allowed for a brief pause, so she leaned against the counter. "Thanks, Martha. I've been putting together all these ideas for the fundraiser, but I'm overwhelmed. Liam's the creative type, so he's leaving event coordination to me, and the more I organize, the more I realize how big a task this is." Martha poured 2 mugs of freshly brewed coffee and slid one toward Ellie. "Take a moment and talk me through it. Sometimes sharing out loud makes it easier to see the path forward." Ellie took a sip, warmth calming her nerves. "We're planning an open house at Living Earth," she explained. "There'll be local musicians, an art sale, maybe a silent auction. We're inviting the neighborhood to see what we do and hopefully gather enough donations. The studio is small, though. We don't have a huge network." She paused, fiddling with the edge of her mug. "I'm worried it won't be enough." Martha studied her intently. "Even if it doesn't solve everything, it'll show developers that you won't leave quietly. Public support can work wonders." Ellie nodded. "That's what Liam says. But there's a bigger piece, something I haven't told him yet. Innovatech Solutions might be involved. Even if I manage to rally a few local sponsors, we're talking about a multi-billion-dollar tech giant that can outspend us 100 times over." Martha pursed her lips, a look of knowing sympathy flashing in her eyes. She reached across the counter to squeeze Ellie's hand. "And if Benjamin Gray is behind that giant, you'll have to decide whether to involve him or confront him." The blunt mention of Ellie's ex-husband made her chest tighten. "That's the last thing I want to do," she admitted, voice trembling. "We haven't spoken since the divorce, and I'm not sure I'm ready to see him, but the cause is too important." Martha nodded slowly. "Look, I can't pretend to know all the pain from your past, but I do know that running from confrontation never ends it. If Benjamin holds any sway, maybe he can help you, assuming he's willing." Ellie bristled at the thought, uncertain if she could risk that level of vulnerability again. What if he won't listen? Or worse, what if he's the very reason they're coming after the property in the first place? "Then you'll face him head-on," Martha answered gently, "and protect what you love. Because, my dear, staying silent might cost you the atelier you poured your heart into." They fell quiet for a moment, the hum of the espresso machine filling the gap. Ellie sipped her coffee, reflecting on Martha's wisdom. How many times had she seen her former life from afar, refusing any contact, believing it was best to keep the wounds sealed? Now, those wounds might need reopening for the sake of everyone depending on Living Earth. Martha set her mug down, turning back to the pastry case as a pair of new customers entered, but before stepping away, she whispered, "You're stronger than you think, Ellie. This new life you've built. It's proof you can handle more than you realize." Ellie inhaled deeply, encouraged by Martha's steadfast faith. She rose from the stool, smoothing her apron. Tomorrow, she'd finalize the event details with Liam, design posters, and start calling in favors from every local business willing to help. A confrontation with Benjamin might still be on the horizon, but for now, she'd focus on rallying the community and trust herself to face whatever came next. 2 days later, Ellie stood in front of an easel set up in the corner of Living Earth, feeling the pressure of a growing to-do list. On the easel was a large poster board where she began mapping out the upcoming fundraiser. Bright neon sticky notes bore scribbled reminders. Call local news, confirm musicians, order refreshments, coordinate silent auction items. Liam hovered nearby, arms folded, as he read each note carefully. "We might need extra volunteers," he said, tapping one of the stickies. "I can recruit some from the college's art club, if that helps." "That'd be great," Ellie replied. She'd already left the daily grind early, just as Martha had urged, determined to tackle the event planning full on. The difference was palpable. She was stepping out from behind her usual routine and diving into something public, something that risked bringing too much attention her way. Glancing at Liam's anxious expression, Ellie forced a small smile. "I'll also ask Martha if she knows anyone who can help with catering. The more local ties we have, the better." Liam nodded, excitement flickering in his eyes. "This is actually coming together. I'm proud of what we're doing, Ellie." She felt a surge of warmth at his words. "Me too," she admitted, pressing a new sticky note onto the board. Her gaze traveled around the studio, stacks of clay, half-finished sculptures, mismatched chairs. This was the place that had rekindled her faith in her own creativity. If stepping out of her safe routine was the cost to save it, she was ready. Moments later, she got a call from Kevin, a local journalist who ran a small arts column in the community paper. He'd heard rumblings about a fundraiser and wanted details. Ellie's stomach twisted as she spoke with him. Publicity would boost their cause, but it also meant reporters might dig deeper into her background. Yet she pushed aside the anxiety, calmly explaining the date, purpose, and hopes for the event. "This is a good story, Ellie," Kevin said, voice crackling on the line. "Folks love hearing about grassroots artists fighting for their space. Maybe we can do a short feature on you before the event. Let readers know who's spearheading it." Her pulse quickened. "Oh, I'm not the only one," she insisted, clearing her throat. "We're a collective here, all working together." Kevin chuckled. "All right, but I'll still want to mention your name. You're sort of the face of this thing, right?" She hesitated. The idea of being the face of anything made her uneasy. But she thought of Liam, Dawn, and everyone else at Living Earth counting on her. "Sure," she finally said. "Whatever helps the atelier." By the time she hung up, Liam's brow quirked with curiosity. "Press coverage." "Yeah," she confirmed, cheeks warming. "They want to interview me specifically." "You'll do great," Liam replied, sincerity lighting his features. "The more coverage, the better." Yet Ellie's thoughts drifted to the possibility that a public spotlight could draw old acquaintances, and possibly Benjamin, back into her orbit. She tried to steel herself with a pep talk, reminding herself how far she'd come. She was no longer the shy spouse trailing behind a charismatic CEO at tech conferences. She'd left that life, built something on her own, and that was worth defending. She placed her phone aside and returned to the planning board, with each step calling potential donors, drafting the event schedule, researching local non-profits that might offer guidance. Her confidence grew. She was out of her comfort zone, undeniably, but she was also forging a path she believed in. As the day wound down, Liam and Ellie locked up Living Earth, stepping into the crisp evening air. For the first time in years, Ellie felt a purposeful adrenaline in her veins. She might be walking into a tangle of publicity and corporate pushback, but she was no longer paralyzed by the thought. She was ready. The fundraiser wasn't just about saving Living Earth. It was also about proving to herself that she had a voice, one strong enough to challenge any obstacle that threatened her newly woven life. Stepping into the bustling community center in central Seattle felt like entering a foreign land. Ellie had arranged a meeting with several local business owners to discuss potential sponsorships for the fundraiser. She could almost sense the ghost of her former self trailing behind her, the version who once accompanied Benjamin to high-powered galas, silently sipping champagne and nodding politely at corporate jargon she didn't understand. But this time, it was Ellie who carried the confidence of a woman on a mission. She smoothed down her simple blazer, an outfit chosen carefully to appear both approachable and professional. As she walked past the front desk, the scent of cleaning solution and the distant echo of basketball shoes squeaking on a gym floor lent the place a distinctly utilitarian feel. In a small, fluorescent-lit conference room, about a dozen local entrepreneurs gathered around a rectangular table, owners of vintage shops, craft breweries, small tech startups. Ellie offered a warm greeting, then jumped into her pitch. She described Living Earth, its mission to foster creativity, and the threat of gentrification looming over it. Most listened with genuine interest. A few brows creased in concern at the mention of a large developer. Ellie eased them toward the idea of supporting the fundraiser with donations or by providing their products at the event for free. "You're speaking my language," said George, a grey-haired proprietor of a nearby bookstore. "I've watched too many local treasures get bought out. It's time we stand up." Encouraged, Ellie distributed flyers, each listing ways the businesses could help: sponsorship tiers, in-kind donations, volunteer opportunities. She spoke clearly and confidently, surprising even herself with how naturally she navigated their questions. Occasionally, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window, poised and articulate, a stark contrast to the timid woman she once was. After the meeting concluded, several attendees lingered to shake her hand. One, a small tech startup founder, recognized her last name and asked if she had any ties to the Grey Empire. Though she felt her heart skip a beat, she responded with a neutral smile. "I used to be married to Benjamin Gray, but that was a long time ago." There was a polite nod. "Well, if that's the same Gray, I bet you learned a thing or two about business." Ellie merely offered a non-committal chuckle, all the while feeling a knot tighten in her stomach. She gathered her materials and excused herself, relief washing over her once she stepped into the hallway. The noise from the adjacent gym muffled her racing thoughts. Outside, a drizzle had begun, dampening the late afternoon sky. Ellie hugged her folder of paperwork against her chest as she made her way to a nearby cafe, not the daily grind, but a more formal spot frequented by local professionals. She had scheduled a brief follow-up with another potential sponsor there. Pushing through the door, she was greeted by the clatter of espresso machines and the drone of business chatter. Men and women in collared shirts and blazers tapped away at laptops or spoke into wireless earbuds. A wave of nostalgia rippled through her. She recalled stepping into places like this with Benjamin, feeling out of place in a life that wasn't hers. Yet today, she felt different, like she belonged because she chose to be here, for her own cause. She sipped a quick Americano while explaining to a local marketing exec how the fundraiser could benefit the entire Fremont district. The conversation went well. She walked out with a promise of promotional flyers and possibly a small cash contribution. As Ellie emerged onto the sidewalk, the city lights blinked on in the early dusk. Her feet ached from standing. Her throat felt parched from so much talking, but a spark of pride glowed in her chest. This new world of behind-the-scenes sponsorships and negotiations no longer seemed so daunting. She saw how her past experiences, painful as some were, had equipped her to communicate, to organize, and to stand firm. Cradling her folder, Ellie breathed in the cool evening air. The swirling tension of fear and determination felt oddly exhilarating. She was forging alliances, bridging communities, and inching Living Earth one step closer to safety. And although the road ahead was anything but simple, she allowed herself a moment to savor this newfound confidence. Ellie tapped her pen anxiously against the kitchen table in her small apartment, going over the final list of sponsors and donations. The fundraiser was only a week away, and while the community had rallied behind Living Earth more than she dared hope, there was still a nagging sense that it wouldn't be enough. Her phone buzzed. A local business name flashed on the screen, one she'd never contacted. Frowning, she answered, her voice cautious. "Hello? Ms. Parker. This is Kendra from Seaboard Properties. I got your number from George at the bookstore. We hear you're organizing an art fundraiser and might be looking for bigger sponsors. I handle philanthropy initiatives for Seaboard." Ellie's stomach fluttered. Seaboard Properties was known for rehabilitating historic venues around Seattle and occasionally stepping in to preserve cultural landmarks. If they were willing to help, it could be a game changer. "Yes, definitely," she said, keeping her tone steady. "We could use all the support we can get." Kendra proposed a meeting at their downtown office. Ellie jotted down the address, heart pounding. The possibility of forging a real alliance with a company that valued preservation was too good to pass up. Still, she worried about any hidden motives. Developers, in her experience, always balance the scales between profit and altruism. Later that afternoon, she found herself in Seaboard's glass-paneled reception area, wearing her best professional outfit and clutching a folder filled with photos of Living Earth. Kendra greeted her with a bright smile, leading her into a modest conference room. "We love community-driven events," Kendra said, offering Ellie a seat. "And your atelier is the heart of Fremont's artistic scene. We might be able to pitch in with a donation and maybe highlight your cause through our social channels, but we want to know more about your long-term goals." Ellie relaxed slightly, impressed by how genuine Kendra seemed. She spread out images of clay sculptures, pottery classes, and local artists working side by side. Living Earth is more than just a studio. It's a place where people discover talents they didn't know they had. "We want to keep it affordable, keep it for the community," Kendra nodded. "Our company has protected other local treasures. We usually look for a viable business plan. Are you open to expansions or even a partnership that includes partial ownership to keep the building safe?" Ellie hesitated, realizing how little she'd considered beyond simply raising funds. "I'll need to speak with the other artists. But if it means staying in Fremont, we're open to discussing options." They talked for nearly an hour, exploring how Seaboard Properties might shield Living Earth from the looming corporate buyout. While nothing was finalized, Ellie left with a sense of hope. She could see that Kendra had a genuine interest, though Ellie knew any deal had to be carefully negotiated. Before she stepped into the elevator, Kendra walked her out, saying quietly, "I've heard rumors Innovatech Solutions might be entangled in the developer's bid. We've faced them on other projects. They can be tough. If you have any personal connections, it might be useful." Ellie's grip tightened on her folder. "I'll keep that in mind," she replied in a measured tone. "Thank you again." "I appreciate your willingness to help." As she emerged onto the busy downtown sidewalk, a breeze ruffled her hair. She inhaled a lungful of city air, mind racing with the new possibilities. Seaboard Properties could be the ally Living Earth desperately needed, bridging that gap between passionate local support and real estate muscle. Yet the mention of Innovatech left a bitter taste. Ellie's thoughts drifted back to Benjamin. Were these behind-the-scenes negotiations under his direct oversight, or was she just fighting a corporate machine wearing his name? Clutching her proposal folder against her chest, she set off toward the bus stop. Despite her swirling doubts, An unexpected alliance had surfaced, and it might be the lifeline that saved Living Earth. She silently vowed to protect the atelier's communal spirit, even if that meant forging careful alliances with companies as big as Seaboard. If it also led her toward a collision course with Benjamin Gray, she'd be ready to stand her ground. 2 days before the big fundraiser, the daily grind hummed with a lively energy that warmed Ellie's heart. Posters announcing "Save Living Earth" decorated the walls, and the baristas proudly wore small pins showing clay pottery icons in support of the cause. Martha stood behind the counter, chatting with patrons about how they could donate or attend the event. It was early evening, and a small group of Living Earth's regulars, Liam, Dawn, and a couple of other artists, had gathered in a corner. They shared coffee, brainstorming last-minute ideas, while customers dropped folded bills into a donation jar on the counter. "You've built quite a community here," Liam remarked to Ellie, admiration in his tone. "I mean, the daily grind feels like an extension of Living Earth these days." Ellie smiled, catching Martha's eye from across the room. "I couldn't have done it without Martha," she replied. "She's always encouraging me, and you, and the rest of the artists. We've all put our hearts into this." Indeed, the cafe had transformed into a hub where people swapped tips on silent auction items, offered to volunteer, and even took business cards for future collaborations. Ellie realized she had become part of something bigger than herself, a makeshift family formed by shared passion and mutual support. Amid the chatter, Dawn mentioned wanting to donate one of her large canvases. "It's a piece I painted during a tough time in my life," she explained, eyes shining with vulnerability. "If it sells, I'll feel like I'm turning that darkness into something good." "That's exactly the spirit we need," Liam said gently, patting her shoulder. The sense of camaraderie was palpable. Ellie marveled at how quickly these bonds had solidified. Just a few weeks ago, she had been serving lattes to many of these folks, keeping a polite, professional distance. Now, they embraced her as a friend, a leader, a confidant. When Martha finally took a break, she approached the group with a gleam in her eye. "We have an anonymous donor," she announced. "Someone just slipped me a sizable check for the event. I wasn't even able to thank them properly. They left in a hurry." Ellie's heart leapt. Could it be from Seaboard Properties or someone else entirely? The small possibility that Benjamin might have quietly contributed flickered through her mind. But she pushed it aside. She wasn't sure how she'd feel about that. Regardless, the donation lifted everyone's spirits. Dawn suggested they celebrate with an impromptu toast, so Martha poured sparkling cider into paper cups. They clinked edges above the cafe's cozy lighting, the sweet fizz carrying a sense of triumph. "To Living Earth," Liam toasted, "and to Ellie, who brought us all together." Ellie blushed, raising her cup. "To all of us. We might be crazy for trying to take on something this big, but we're doing it together." The group's laughter filled the space, a soft soundtrack to the bustling evening. Watching them, Ellie felt an overwhelming gratitude swell in her chest. It had been a long time since she'd experienced such a sense of belonging. She glanced around at the outpouring of affection, pats on the back, encouraging nods, eager chatter about final event details. In that moment, she realized these were the connections she had desperately craved during her marriage. Back then, her life had been filled with superficial gatherings, corporate dinners, and forced smiles. Now, she had genuine friendships forged by a shared mission. It felt like family, the kind you choose rather than inherit. As closing time approached, the group helped tidy the cafe. Chairs were stacked, floors swept, and the collection jar was counted, a pleasant sum that would cover some of the event costs. Ellie let out a contented sigh, exchanging a grateful look with Martha. Outside, the Seattle night glimmered with city lights. Ellie pulled on her jacket, heart brimming with hope. This new family stood behind her, ready to tackle whatever threats loomed on the horizon, and she had never felt more determined or more prepared to protect the place they all held dear. Ellie's shift at the daily grind began in the usual way, switching on the lights, wiping down the chalkboard menu, and greeting a trickle of regulars looking for their morning caffeine fix. She was still yawning as the espresso machine sputtered to life. Outside, the early Seattle sky was grey enough to blend with the concrete sidewalks. As the door chimed open for what felt like the 10th time that hour, Ellie turned with a welcoming smile that froze halfway across her face. Standing just inside the entrance was a tall man in a sleek charcoal suit, hair still damp from a light drizzle. Benjamin Gray. He paused too, recognition flickering across his gaze. Their eyes locked in a moment that seemed to stretch far beyond a few seconds. Ellie's grip on the coffee pot tightened. She had envisioned this reunion 1,000 times, none of them in front of curious onlookers in the cafe she called home. A current of hushed tension spread through the patrons seated near the counter. Martha, scrubbing a corner of the pastry display, darted a glance between Ellie and the imposing figure in the doorway. At last, Ellie managed to steady her voice. "Benjamin," she said quietly, hoping her tone didn't betray the frantic beating of her heart. He stepped closer, the faint hum of conversation around them falling into muted background noise. "Ellie," he replied, his voice soft and low. For a moment, he looked unsure of himself, a stark contrast to the commanding CEO she remembered. She forced herself to maintain a professional calm. "What can I get for you?" she asked, her pen poised to write on a small notepad. It was absurdly formal, but she didn't know how else to act. Benjamin seemed to notice the forced distance in her posture. He glanced at the menu overhead, though his gaze flicked back to her every few seconds. "Just coffee," he said at last. "Black, please." Ellie nodded, throat tight. She poured a fresh cup from the carafe, trying to keep her hand steady. "Here you go." She extended it across the counter, bracing for a shock if their fingers touched, but Benjamin took the cup without brushing her hand, his movements painfully deliberate. A minute passed, feeling like an hour, as he sipped. Ellie was hyper-aware of every small sound, the hiss of the espresso machine, a spoon clinking against a ceramic mug, the distant scrape of a chair on the floor. She heard Martha clear her throat softly and then step away, giving them space. Finally, Benjamin exhaled, his eyes roaming the cafe. "You look well," he said, voice barely audible above the faint hum of conversation. "I wasn't expecting this." She swallowed. "I know." "I'm in the area for a meeting," he continued, carefully. "I was running early and needed a place to wait. I didn't realize this was your cafe." Ellie almost let out a bitter laugh at the irony. Seattle had hundreds of coffee shops. He happened to choose the one she worked in, or maybe it wasn't chance at all. She couldn't be sure. Nodding stiffly, she tried to keep her composure. "I only work here. The place belongs to Martha." A pause. "I'm just a—" "Don't say just a waitress," he interrupted gently. His gaze softened. "You're not just anything, Ellie." Her breath caught, old emotions stirring like ghosts she'd never fully banished. She straightened her posture, pulling the notepad tight against her chest. "You should probably grab a seat if you're waiting," she said, her voice taut. Benjamin hesitated, eyes still pinned on her, as if searching for some hint of the woman he once knew. Then he nodded, stepping away from the counter. Before he settled at a small table near the window, he murmured, "Thanks for the coffee." Ellie watched him go, her heart rattling inside her ribcage. She felt Martha's reassuring presence at her elbow, though neither woman spoke. In the hush of that moment, Ellie fought the urge to flee into the back room, to spare herself the swirl of conflicting memories. But she stayed, forcing herself to remain calm and professional. Benjamin Gray was here, and their worlds had just collided in the most unexpected way possible. The fortress Ellie had so carefully built around her new life began to quake. And something told her that after this day, nothing would remain quite the same. Benjamin sat at the small wooden table by the window, his jacket draped over the back of the chair. He kept his focus on the coffee cup, occasionally glancing out at the drizzle painting the sidewalk. Across the shop, Ellie's stomach fluttered with nerves. She wondered what he was thinking, or if he was merely pretending he didn't notice how the entire place buzzed with curiosity. Eventually, a break in the customer flow gave Ellie no choice but to walk over and see if he needed anything else. Her mind churned through possible greetings, but all that emerged when she reached his table was a thin, polite smile. "Everything all right here?" Benjamin nodded. "I'm good," he replied, voice too quiet for someone with his usual confidence. He gestured to the seat across from him. "Have a minute to talk." Ellie hesitated, every part of her wanting to say no. She wasn't ready to peel back old scabs, but a tiny voice inside her whispered that ignoring him wouldn't stop the ache of questions that had lingered these past 5 years. Reluctantly, she slid into the chair, resting her hands on her lap. They sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Benjamin cleared his throat. "I never expected to see you here like this. Are you happy?" The words sounded awkward, as though he'd rehearsed them in his mind. "I am," Ellie answered carefully. She willed her heart to stop pounding. "Life is simpler now, less suffocating." He winced almost imperceptibly at that, then dipped his head. "I deserved that." Another pause. "I hope you know I never meant to make you feel trapped back then. But looking back, I realize I was so wrapped up in deals and expansion that I lost sight of, well, a lot." Ellie tightened her fingers together. Memories rushed back, quiet dinners she ate alone, waiting for him to come home from marathon meetings, the tension of boardrooms overshadowing any support for her art. "That was a different time," she finally said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I've moved on, and I'm building something for myself here." Benjamin nodded, an unreadable expression flickering across his face. "I can see that. You seem more grounded." She let out a slow breath, not sure if she appreciated the observation or found it intrusive. "What about you?" she asked, surprising even herself with the question. "Still running Innovatech?" His gaze flicked to the window, where raindrops traced a steady path. "Yes. It's grown a lot since everything changed. Sometimes I look at what I've achieved and wonder why I feel so empty." He exhaled softly. "Maybe I'm missing a sense of purpose that isn't tied to quarterly earnings." Ellie found herself momentarily disarmed by his honesty. She remembered the charismatic drive that had once drawn her to him, now tinted with regret. But before she could respond, the cafe door jingled again, and a cluster of people bustled in, snapping her back to reality. "I need to get back to work," she said, standing quickly. "We're busy this morning." Benjamin rose as well, collecting his jacket. "Of course, I don't want to keep you." But he hesitated, eyes lingering on her face. "Ellie, there's more I'd like to talk about. If you have time another day?" She resisted the swirl of emotions the invitation ignited. "I'm organizing something important for Living Earth, the art studio where I volunteer. I won't have much free time." She offered no further details, not wanting him anywhere near that project if he was, in fact, tied to the rumored development deals. He dipped his head in understanding, though his expression carried a hint of disappointment. "Okay, I guess I'll see you around then." And with that, he slipped past her and out the door, melding into the grey Seattle backdrop. Ellie stood there, her chest tight. Conversations and silences, They had always swung between them like a pendulum. With him gone, the cafe's warm hum resumed, but she felt an unspoken tension hanging in the air. She couldn't tell if their exchange had offered closure or merely opened a fresh layer of uncertainty. Yet one thing was sure: Benjamin Gray's reappearance had shaken her more than she cared to admit. By evening, rain hammered the rooftops, and Ellie practically ran the 2 blocks from the cafe to living earth, her jacket hood pulled tight against the downpour. Once inside the studio, she shut the door behind her and exhaled a shaky breath, droplets rolling off her sleeves onto the concrete floor. The usual clatter of half-finished pottery and paint-splattered workbenches greeted her, bringing a wave of relief. She inhaled the familiar scent of clay and dust, letting the calm of this creative space ground her. Images of Benjamin's face still hovered in her mind, though she shoved them aside. Liam glanced up from his station, a flicker of concern in his eyes. "You look rattled. Everything okay?" Ellie nodded stiffly. "I'm fine. Just a busy day," she mumbled, busying herself at a nearby table. She started gathering lumps of clay, hands moving methodically as she set up her wheel. "I need to work on something. Clear my head." He didn't pry further, instead returning to the small sculptural piece he was carving. Yet Ellie sensed his worry, and part of her wanted to confide in him about Benjamin's surprise visit, but fear of unleashing all those complicated emotions kept her silent. She flipped on the potter's wheel, pressing her foot on the pedal. The soft whir calmed her a little. She molded the wet clay between her palms, shaping it into a growing cylinder. Each rotation gave her a sense of control, the clay yielding to her gentle pressure. Here in living earth, she could create something tangible out of raw material, as opposed to the intangible swirl of her past. A quiet hush settled over the studio, broken only by the thrum of the wheel and the occasional scrape of Liam's carving tool. Ellie's thoughts drifted to the fundraiser, now just days away, and the looming possibility that Innovatech or a related corporation might stake its claim. The idea that Benjamin, intentionally or not, might be a driving force behind that corporate threat weighed on her, yet the memory of him sipping coffee, eyes reflecting an unexpected vulnerability, tugged at her heart. He had looked nearly contrite, almost lonely. She couldn't help but recall the early days of their relationship, back when mutual curiosity and admiration drew them close, before the relentless demands of his ambition overshadowed everything else. She increased the speed of the wheel, pressing the clay upward until it formed a tall, slender vase. Her mind wandered further, remembering how she once dreamed of opening a small gallery, an idea Benjamin initially supported but never truly helped realize. Broken promises, overshadowed by shareholder meetings and product launches, still stung like old bruises. A sudden tremor in her hand made the clay wobble. She clenched her jaw, trying to steady it, but the shape collapsed in on itself, splattering wet lumps across her apron. "Damn it," she muttered under her breath. Liam looked up, brow creased. "Need a break," she sighed, cutting the wheel's power. "Maybe I'm distracted." She flicked off bits of clay, frustration burning behind her eyes. He stepped closer, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You've been working non-stop to save this place. If your mind's elsewhere, maybe it's time to talk about it." Ellie shrugged. "There's not much to say. Old ghosts. You know how it is." She tried to force a reassuring smile, but it fell flat. "I'll be okay." After a moment, Liam returned to his station, though tension lingered in the air. Ellie cleaned up the mess on her wheel, replaying her conversation with Benjamin in her head. She couldn't ignore the possibility that soon she might have to face him in a more direct confrontation, especially if the rumors were true about Innovatech's involvement in the building's sale. Pressing her foot on the pedal again, she grabbed a fresh lump of clay. The repetition of shaping, smoothing, and centering usually offered solace. tonight, it felt like a desperate attempt to carve out order from chaos. In the steady spin of the wheel, she found a fleeting calm, a reminder that art had been her refuge before, and it would be again. No matter how many echoes of the past threatened to return, she vowed not to lose herself. After all, she'd already spent years rebuilding who she was. She refused to let those memories shatter her fragile peace now. On a breezy afternoon, Ellie arrived at Living Earth to find Liam pacing in front of the large windows. His phone clutched in hand, he looked up the moment she stepped inside, worry etched on his face. "You won't believe this," he said, motioning her closer. "I just heard from a friend who works in real estate. The developer that's eyeing our building is finalizing paperwork. It could all be official within weeks if we don't stop it." Ellie's pulse kicked up. "But we have the fundraiser tomorrow. Can't we slow them down if we prove there's massive community support?" Liam raked a hand through his hair. "I hope so. But apparently, they've got big financial backers ready to swoop in and close the deal. If it's who we suspect—" He trailed off, not needing to say Innovatech by name. Fighting a surge of panic, Ellie glanced at the scattered event posters taped around the studio. "We'll have to make the event count. And if that isn't enough, we'll try other avenues. Media coverage, partnerships with people like Seaboard Properties, petitions, anything." He eyed her sharply, suspicion glimmering. "You said you used to be married to the CEO of Innovatech, right? Could you talk to him, see if he can back off or at least reconsider?" Her stomach twisted with dread. She'd managed to keep Benjamin's reappearance under wraps, but perhaps it was time to come clean. Pressing her lips together, she nodded stiffly. "Benjamin's been in touch, sort of. He showed up at the daily grind a few days ago." Liam's eyes widened. "And you didn't say anything?" "It caught me off guard," Ellie admitted, voice trembling slightly. "We barely spoke. I can't just snap my fingers and make him care about Living Earth." She paused, memories of broken promises flickering like old film. "I doubt he'll sacrifice his business interests for—" "Ellie, we're desperate," Liam interrupted. "I hate the idea of you having to lean on him. But if it can protect us from being bulldozed by corporate greed, maybe it's worth a shot." She swallowed hard. Years ago, she had hoped for his support, only to watch him break his word time after time. "I'll consider it," she finally said, voice subdued. "But I won't pin my hopes on him." They moved to one of the work tables, sorting through final decorations and silent auction items for the fundraiser. Anxiety hung in the air. Every piece of pottery, painting, and sculpture told a story. A mosaic of all the artists who found belonging here. Ellie refused to let that be snuffed out by a faceless developer. Around midday, her phone buzzed. She nearly ignored it until she saw an unknown number from a corporate area code. Heart-pounding, she answered, bracing for more bad news. Instead, a slick-sounding voice on the other end introduced himself as a representative from the developer, wanting to confirm the building's dimensions and confirm lease information. Ellie forced polite replies, but inside she seethed. They were forging ahead at full speed, unconcerned about the fate of the atelier. When she hung up, she relayed the call to Liam. "They're not wasting time," she said grimly. "They're gathering data, probably finalizing everything." Liam slumped onto a stool. "We have to make tomorrow's event impossible to ignore. This might be our only shot to turn the tide." Determination hardened Ellie's voice. "We will," she said. "I'm not giving up, and neither should you." Yet as the afternoon wore on, she felt the weight of old betrayals pressing in on her. Benjamin's broken promises from their marriage loomed large in her memory. Illusions of him, someday supporting her artistic aspirations, illusions that all crumbled under the relentless demands of his empire. Could she dare trust him now? She found herself glancing at her phone repeatedly, half hoping he would call and magically fix everything, half dreading another empty gesture. But the screen remained silent. So Ellie pressed forward, helping Liam finalize the setup for the fundraiser. If they were truly running out of time, she'd wage this battle in the only way she knew how, by rallying the community to stand against a wave of corporate might. Tomorrow would reveal just how strong their unity was, and whether any glimmer of help might come from the one person who once promised her the world but left her standing alone. The day of the fundraiser dawned with an uneasy mixture of excitement and dread. Living Earth buzzed with activity. Tables lined the walls displaying pottery, paintings, and handcrafted jewelry, while volunteers scurried around, adjusting signs and setting up the makeshift stage for local musicians. The place looked alive, a vibrant testament to the neighborhood's creative pulse. Ellie tried to keep her nerves in check, greeting arriving guests with a welcoming smile. Liam moved briskly among them, directing people to the silent auction items. Martha had arrived early, with trays of pastries from the daily grind, coaxing folks to sample them in exchange for small donations. Before long, the space filled with chatter, the echo of laughter competing with guitar strums from a corner. Ellie spotted a local reporter snapping photos. A swirl of relief mingled with adrenaline. They needed this attention. They needed every ounce of support to convince the city and any lurking corporate backers that Living Earth was worth saving. Halfway through the event, a ripple of commotion spread near the entrance. Ellie glanced up, heart skipping. She saw the familiar silhouette of Benjamin Gray standing just inside the door. The crowd seemed to part for him, curiosity sparking in their faces as they recognized the figure from Seattle business headlines. Her throat went dry. A wave of conflicting emotions surged. Hope that he might help, fear of heartbreak repeating itself, and anger at the possibility he was tied to the very deal threatening them. Gathering her composure, she navigated past the silent auction tables, weaving around onlookers until she reached him. "Benjamin," she said, voice taut, "I didn't expect you here." She noticed how eyes around them lingered in fascination, as if the presence of a billionaire CEO at a humble art studio was some grand novelty. Benjamin held her gaze, ignoring the curious stares. "Ellie, I heard about this fundraiser, thought I should see for myself." He scanned the artwork on display, the swirl of community members. Clearly, a lot of people love this place. "Yes," she agreed, stepping away from the crowd so they could speak without a full audience. "They do. It's a lifeline for many, including me." Sucking in a breath, she added, "So if Innovatech or any of your subsidiaries are involved in buying this building, please reconsider." He lowered his voice. "I found out too late. A division linked to a partner company was negotiating the purchase. I tried to intervene, but the gears were in motion." He paused, lips pressed into a grim line. "I'm sorry, Ellie. I didn't set out to harm you or Living Earth." Her anger flared. "But you could have stopped it at the start. That's the power you have, Benjamin. How do I know you're not just here to smooth things over for your own PR?" He winced at the accusation, then raked a hand through his hair. "You have every right to question me. I made mistakes before, put business first, but I promise you, I'm not here to make a spectacle. I came to see how I can help, really help." Skepticism twisted in Ellie's gut. Words were easy. She'd been lulled by them before. Yet a flicker of genuine regret shone in his eyes. Before she could respond, the reporter who'd been covering the event edged closer, camera poised. Sensing the moment, Benjamin lifted his chin. "I want to offer a public statement," he said, voice carrying across the room. "Ellie Parker is an incredible artist, and Living Earth is a beacon for our community. I'm prepared to donate personally, and to propose a collaboration with my charitable foundation to protect this atelier." Ellie's breath caught. A hush fell over the crowd, eyes darting between them. Murmurs rippled through the space. Liam stepped up, confusion warring with hope on his face. "This place is more than just a building," Benjamin continued, sounding measured yet earnest. "I won't let corporate interests bulldoze it without a fight, even if it means renegotiating contracts at Innovatech." A surge of emotion overwhelmed Ellie. Had he truly come to fight for Living Earth, or was this just another broken promise in the making? Yet as he finished speaking, applause broke out, scattered at first, then swelling. People stared at Ellie, waiting for her reaction. She stood rooted, heart pounding. In that single declaration, he'd put himself in the spotlight, risking personal and professional fallout. Whether he genuinely meant it or not, one thing was sure. This time, his betrayal or redemption would not stay silent. A hush settled over Living Earth, following Benjamin's public declaration. For an instant, Ellie thought she glimpsed a true glimmer of hope in his eyes, something genuine behind the polished facade. Applause rippled through the crowd, and a few reporters jostled for quotes, but Ellie felt a deep tremor of uncertainty. Could she trust him this time? Once people resumed mingling around the silent auction, Liam cautiously approached. "That was unexpected." His gaze darted between Ellie and Benjamin, who was now surrounded by curious onlookers. Ellie's heart thudded. "I don't know what to think," she admitted. "He swore he'd do something to protect Living Earth, but I've heard promises before. And as soon as his board or finances got threatened, he backed away." Liam's frown deepened. "Let's hope he won't do that again. We need all the help we can get, so I guess we'll see." Throughout the rest of the event, Ellie moved mechanically, smiling for photos and thanking guests. The fundraiser seemed a triumph on the surface. Friendly faces poured in. Local musicians played upbeat tunes, and volunteers collected donations. Yet a gnawing dread shadowed Ellie's thoughts. She couldn't shake the feeling that Benjamin's pledge might lead her toward yet another heartbreak. When the evening finally wound down, the crowd thinned. Dawn and Liam began packing leftover sculptures, carefully wrapping them in bubble wrap. Across the room, Benjamin lingered by a display of Ellie's pottery, small earthenware bowls with swirling patterns she'd painstakingly carved. She walked over, mustering a polite tone. "You stayed till the end." He turned, hands in his suit pockets. "I wanted to see how it wrapped up and to give you some news. I spoke to a member of my board during the event. They're not happy." A flicker of regret crossed his face. "But I made it clear I won't stand by while Living Earth is destroyed." Ellie's pulse stumbled. A part of her wanted to be grateful. Another part remained wary. "So what does that mean, exactly?" "It means I'm leveraging my shares in a way that might force the developer to reconsider or at least delay the purchase. We'll see how it plays out." Benjamin's gaze flicked around at the half-dismantled exhibits and the artists carefully cleaning up. "I know this place matters to you." Before she could respond, Liam called her name from across the studio, waving his phone with an urgent expression. Ellie excused herself and hurried over. "What's wrong?" "George from the bookstore just texted," Liam said, breath uneven. He heard rumors from an inside contact. The developer is filing final paperwork first thing tomorrow morning. "They're ignoring the fundraiser's success, ignoring all public outcry." Ellie's stomach lurched. "But we raised money. We have media coverage. Isn't that enough to give them pause?" Liam shook his head, voice quivering. "Apparently not. Word is they're too close to finalizing everything. Even if Benjamin tries to stop it, the momentum might be unstoppable." A wave of panic and despair crashed over her. Everything she'd worked for, all the time energy and vulnerability poured into the fundraiser, felt suddenly inadequate. She turned to see Benjamin stepping closer, overhearing the frantic exchange. "I'll make some calls," he said firmly. "We'll force a board meeting tonight if I have to." But a sense of helplessness welled in Ellie's chest. She recalled countless nights waiting for him to fulfill a promise, only to watch him buckle under corporate pressure. Tears of frustration burned her eyes. "We're running out of time," she whispered, voice trembling. Benjamin tried to rest a comforting hand on her arm, but she stepped back. "Don't," she said, blinking hard to hold back tears. "We're at a breaking point. If you can't stop them now, I can't watch it all slip away again." He stood there, pain evident in his expression, as if realizing the fragility of Ellie's faith. Meanwhile, Liam set down his phone, his shoulders sagging. Around them, a few volunteers paused, sensing something was very wrong. In that moment, a hush descended over Living Earth. It felt like a collective intake of breath, as if every person in the studio knew they were teetering on a precipice. Despite the night's hopeful veneer, a crushing darkness weighed on Ellie's heart, threatening to snuff out the fragile spark she'd protected for so long. Early the next morning, Ellie stood alone in Living Earth, the echoes of last night's chatter and music still lingering in her mind. Grey light filtered through the tall windows, illuminating dust motes in the air. The fundraiser had succeeded beyond expectation in terms of community turnout, yet the looming fear of imminent eviction gnawed at her thoughts. She stared at the leftover donation box, still half filled with envelopes. Normally, the generosity would have uplifted her spirit, but now it felt like a drop in the ocean compared to the developer's unstoppable momentum. She rubbed her temples, wishing she could stifle the oncoming headache. Footsteps approached from behind. She turned to find Martha, wearing her warm smile despite the early hour. "I figured I'd find you here," Martha said softly. "Couldn't sleep." Ellie shook her head. "Everything feels so uncertain." "I tried to rest, but I just ended up tossing and turning." Martha nodded sympathetically. "I understand." She walked around, surveying the scattered chairs and half-dismantled displays. "You've poured your heart into this place, Ellie. Don't give up now." Ellie forced a small laugh. "Give up? I wish I could, but if the deal goes through today, we'll be given notice, and it's out of my hands." Her eyes stung as tears threatened to form. "I tried fighting so hard. I don't know what else to do." Martha's gaze was steady. "Sometimes, when you've done all you can, the next step is to lean on the people around you. You're not alone in this." Those words washed over Ellie, soothing but also stirring her guilt. "I know," she said, voice cracking. I feel like I let everyone down if this fails." Martha placed a comforting hand on Ellie's shoulder. "You rallied a whole community. That's not a failure. Whatever happens, remember that." A moment later, Liam appeared at the doorway, phone in hand. "No major news yet," he said grimly, as though reading Ellie's mind. "But my contact thinks final signatures could happen by noon." Ellie inhaled a shaky breath, bracing for the worst. "What about Benjamin?" she asked, unsure if she should even voice the question. "Has he reached out?" Liam shook his head. "Not to me. Maybe he's in some all-night meeting, trying to throw a wrench into the deal. Or maybe—" He let the sentence trail off, not wanting to voice the possibility that Benjamin had given up. Ellie tried not to flinch. She recalled the defeated look on Benjamin's face when she stepped away from his attempted comfort. A pang of regret joined her swirling emotions, but she buried it. If he couldn't stop this, regret wouldn't matter. Her phone buzzed, and she snatched it from her pocket, heart pounding. The unknown number displayed made her nervous, but she answered anyway. "Hello?" A clipped voice identified himself as a city official. Ellie's heart hammered. Maybe it was about Living Earth, but the call was about permits for future building demolition in the Fremont neighborhood, referencing an upcoming hearing. She listened, sickened, as the official explained that all relevant parties would be notified once final approval was granted. There was a pause at the end, presumably to let her speak. Ellie summoned courage she didn't feel. "Yes, thank you. I appreciate the information." The official ended the call politely, leaving her numb. They were already planning to submit for demolition approval. Even if they hadn't signed final papers yet, it was close enough that the city was preparing, she told Liam and Martha, voice trembling. They're moving full steam ahead. Silence stretched among them, each grappling with the magnitude of what that meant. Ellie's mind reeled. Did all their efforts truly amount to nothing? She pictured the potter's wheels dismantled, the clay sinks torn out, the walls stripped of the countless paintings that gave living earth its soul. She slumped against a work table, tears slipping free. Martha and Liam closed in, arms offering support. In that shared heartbreak, Ellie felt a flicker of unexpected warmth. Even in her darkest hour, she wasn't alone. Friends stood beside her, ready to face the worst. And somewhere beneath her despair, a quiet resolve began to stir. This might be living Earth's lowest point, but Ellie knew she couldn't let it end here. Even if the official path seemed blocked, she had to keep searching for a way forward, finding strength within herself and in the people who believed in her. A restless midday sun broke through Seattle's persistent clouds, casting sharp shadows on the sleek downtown skyline. Ellie found herself standing in the lobby of Innovatech Solutions, heart pounding as she waited for the elevator. She hadn't planned to come here, but desperation left her no choice. Moments ago, she'd received a cryptic text from Benjamin. "Board meeting at noon. Come if you can. I might need your voice to convince them." She doubted her presence could sway corporate titans. But what did she have left to lose? The elevator doors opened with a ding, revealing a gleaming interior lined with polished mirrors. Ellie stepped in, pressed the button for the top floor, and exhaled. This was a place she once knew, though back then she'd been the silent wife, smiling politely at colleagues who barely acknowledged her. Today, she was here as Ellie Parker, someone who'd learned how to fight for what mattered. When the doors slid open, she stepped into a marbled reception area. A sleek desk manned by a composed assistant greeted her with mild surprise. "Can I help you?" "I'm Ellie Parker," she said, trying to inject confidence into her tone. "Benjamin Gray is expecting me." The assistant paused, then pressed an intercom button. After a brief exchange, he nodded and directed Ellie to the large conference room at the end of the hall. She strode forward, forcing herself not to shrink under the intimidating architecture. Inside, a table of stern-faced executives turned as she entered. The atmosphere crackled with tension. Benjamin stood at the far end, flanked by two associates. His expression flickered with relief when he saw her. One of the board members, a grey-haired man with a no-nonsense demeanor, narrowed his gaze. "Is there a reason you've brought an outside party to this meeting, Mr. Gray?" Benjamin cleared his throat. "Ellie Parker is directly impacted by the Fremont property purchase. She's here to represent the community, an essential perspective for our corporate responsibility discussions." A murmur swept through the room. Ellie's pulse thumped. Public speaking wasn't her forte, but she recalled how she had addressed crowds at the fundraiser. Standing straighter, she said, "Living Earth is more than a building. It's an art studio, a community center. Your development partner aims to demolish it for high-end condos, displacing scores of artists and local residents." A woman in a sharp blazer leaned back in her chair. "We're aware it's an art space, but from a business standpoint, the development offers significant returns. We can't ignore that." Ellie steeled herself. "I get it, profit matters. But what about legacy? Innovatech Solutions positions itself as forward-thinking, socially conscious. Bulldozing a cultural hub doesn't align with that image. The negative PR alone could be devastating." A tense silence fell. Ellie's words seemed to strike a nerve. Another executive, glancing at a folder brimming with financial graphs, muttered, "We can't risk a large-scale investor pullout. This partnership is crucial for expansions. A philanthropic angle is one thing, but halting a multi-million-dollar deal is another." Benjamin cut in, his voice firm. "We'll take a hit in the short term, but we're playing a long game. Preserving a space like Living Earth can reinforce our brand values. I'm prepared to adjust our strategic plan." His eyes flicked to Ellie, then back to the board members. "I won't stand by if it means destroying her community's lifeblood." A cacophony of objections erupted. Some board members argued about fiduciary responsibilities and shareholder expectations. Others seemed unsettled, unsure whether to side with tradition or innovation. Ellie felt her chest tighten amid the corporate jargon. Taking a breath, she spoke again. "Look, you can weigh numbers all day, but have you seen the faces of the people who lose their homes for your profits? Have you met the artists who rely on Living Earth to share their creativity with the world? If Innovatech truly wants to be an industry leader, it should consider the real human cost of its decisions." A hush fell. A few executives shifted uncomfortably, as though her words pricked their conscience. Benjamin seized the moment, flipping open a document. "I propose we either back out of the current deal or reshape it to preserve the atelier. I'm willing to stake a portion of my shares on this. If you force me out as CEO for it, so be it." Ellie's heart lurched. He was risking everything. The board members exchanged startled glances. Tension roiled. But seeing Benjamin's unwavering stance sparked a flicker of hope in Ellie. For once, his words carried the ring of sincerity, no half measures, no easy outs. And in that charged instant, Ellie realized they stood on the brink of a major turning point. If Benjamin truly followed through on his promise, it might be the difference between Living Earth's demise and its salvation. The question was whether this board would be swayed by principle or remain enslaved to profit. The corporate tug-of-war played out in a flurry of motions, counter-motions, and heated debate. At times, Ellie felt lost in the maze of legal and financial terms. Yet every time frustration tugged at her courage, she reminded herself of Living Earth's walls, lined with art that captured souls from all walks of life. After nearly 2 hours, the board called a recess, leaving Benjamin and Ellie alone in the conference room's corner. She leaned against the polished wall, pulse still racing. "Do you really mean it?" she asked quietly. "You'll risk your position for this." He met her gaze, unwavering. "I have to. If I let them bury Living Earth, it's just another broken promise. I'm done running from my conscience." Emotion swelled in Ellie's chest. For so long, she had wanted him to choose something other than money or prestige. Seeing him do it now, at such a precarious moment, hit her harder than she expected. She whispered a tremulous, "Thank you," not certain what else to say. Minutes later, the board members filed back in, eyes stern. The grey-haired chairman cleared his throat. "We've conferred privately. The majority view is that Innovatech must carefully preserve its brand while protecting shareholder value, because Mr. Gray is personally invested in modifying this deal, will accept his proposal, with conditions." Ellie's breath caught. She cast a hopeful glance at Benjamin. He gestured for the chairman to continue. "We'll negotiate with our partner developer to keep the atelier intact. It may require partial redesign or compensation from Mr. Gray's personal shares," the chairman said, tone clipped. But if the losses exceed a certain threshold, or if shareholders revolt, we reserve the right to revisit Mr. Gray's status as CEO." A thick tension underscored that final phrase. Ellie realized how precarious this truly was for Benjamin. She also sensed from the board's gaze that if he failed to navigate the fallout, they might oust him in a heartbeat. Benjamin, however, only nodded firmly. "I accept. Let's get started." Every hour we delay puts that community closer to eviction. A chorus of subdued agreement spread across the table. Ellie felt a rush of relief and disbelief all at once. Was Living Earth really going to be saved? As the board adjourned, people shuffled out with hushed conversations. One or two members offered Ellie curt nods, acknowledging her presence if not exactly endorsing it. She leaned against the conference table, exhaling a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Is it over?" she asked, voice trembling. Benjamin rested a hand on the table's edge. "Not quite. We still have to renegotiate the contract with the developer, and I have to reassure my shareholders we aren't sabotaging the company." He looked at Ellie, a wry smile curving his lips. "But they won't evict Living Earth on schedule." "That's a start." Emotion welled in her eyes. She recalled the heartbreak of their marriage, the countless times she'd waited for him to show up for her dreams. Yet this time, in a grand boardroom battle, he'd stayed and fought. "Thank you," she repeated softly. He studied her face, eyes reflecting mingled relief and regret. "I'd do it again if it means not losing you a second time." A wave of vulnerability swept through Ellie. For months, she'd carved a life in Fremont that excluded him, shaping her identity away from his shadow. But here, in the quiet hush after the board's decision, she felt a fragile glimmer of possibility, that perhaps they could meet on equal ground at last. They left the conference room side by side. Outside the glass walls, Innovatech employees pretended not to stare. Ellie could almost see a new path forming, Living Earth spared from demolition, a wave of relief spreading through the artists. But the emotional gap between her and Benjamin wasn't easily bridged by corporate deals. They had bigger wounds to address. As they parted ways, he promised to keep her updated on negotiations. "Go tell them the good news. Let them know they'll have time to breathe while we sort out the final details." Ellie nodded, smiling through tears. She hurried out of the building, heart pounding with a mix of joy and trepidation. She'd fought, and for once, Benjamin had fought too. And though the conflict might not be completely settled, the end was finally in sight. A future where Living Earth remained a thriving home for creative souls, and where Ellie's own heart might find the closure and renewal it had long sought. The following week felt like a dream. Freed from the immediate threat of demolition, Living Earth buzzed with renewed optimism. While the renegotiation wasn't fully signed, the developer had paused eviction notices, and the city withheld any further demolition permits. For the first time since the crisis began, the artists worked without a looming cloud over their heads. Ellie moved around the studio, helping Dawn set up new canvases and fielding questions from volunteers eager to expand Living Earth's offerings. Plans emerged for classes in sculpture, painting, and even small exhibitions featuring local talent. It was as if the near loss of Living Earth had fueled an explosion of creativity. Late in the afternoon, Ellie slipped outside for a breath of fresh air. The sun was starting its slow descent, casting long rays that danced across Fremont's eclectic streets. She stood near the studio's entrance, arms crossed gently over her chest, allowing herself a few moments of stillness. She thought about how everything could have ended so differently. If Benjamin hadn't stood up to his board, if the fundraiser hadn't gained enough momentum, if the local press hadn't covered their cause, it all felt like a precarious balance that could have toppled at any moment. A familiar voice at her side made her turn. "Taking a quiet moment?" Benjamin asked, hands in the pockets of a casual jacket rather than his usual suit. His face looked more relaxed than she'd ever seen. Ellie nodded. "Yes, it's nice to breathe, knowing we're not about to be locked out of our own studio." He glanced at the vibrant murals decorating nearby brick walls. "I spoke with the developer again today. The reworked contract should be signed by the end of next week. Your atelier will remain intact, with the building owned by a non-profit trust partially funded by my personal foundation. We'll create a structure so no one can ever swoop in and evict you again." Warmth bloomed in Ellie's chest, accompanied by a sense of surreal disbelief. She offered a quiet "thank you," hoping her gratitude didn't sound too small for what he'd done. Benjamin nodded, gaze drifting over the passers-by who were sipping coffee or strolling with art portfolios. "I've been thinking about what you said, about how I never truly supported your art, or your need for a life beyond boardrooms. I was blind back then." He exhaled, voice soft. "I'm sorry." Ellie studied his profile, seeing traces of the man she once loved and glimpses of someone new, more reflective. "I appreciate the apology," she said carefully. "We've both changed. Maybe we had to find ourselves separately before we could be in the same space again." His eyes flicked to hers, brimming with quiet hope. Could that space ever be more than friendship? Her heart fluttered. They stood on the threshold of a second chance, but the scars of their past still lingered. "I'm not sure yet," she admitted. "I know I care about you, and I see you've done something incredible here, but I also have my own life now, my own identity. I can't go back to how it was." He nodded. "I wouldn't want that. I'd rather build something new together, respecting the people we've become." Silence fell between them, but it felt comforting, not awkward. Then Ellie took a soft breath. "I'd like that too, slowly, step by step. I don't expect perfection." A small smile touched his lips. "Nor do I." In the orange glow of the fading sun, they walked back inside Living Earth, side by side. Liam noticed them from across the room, a curious blend of acceptance and relief crossing his face. A few other artists, seeing Benjamin's relaxed demeanor, offered him friendly nods. No one forgot that he once symbolized the corporate world that threatened them, but now he stood among them as a benefactor and ally. Ellie guided Benjamin to a pottery wheel where an unfinished clay piece rested. "Want to try?" she asked, half challenging, half inviting. He chuckled, rolling up his sleeves, and placed a cautious hand on the cool, pliable mass. In that intimate, unspoken moment, hands on clay, hearts open to possibility, they shared a glimpse of what redemption could look like. The fight to save Living Earth had given birth to something deeper, a reaffirmation of Ellie's independence, and a sign that genuine transformations were possible. And though the journey to trust again would require patience, they both sensed it was a reward worth fighting for. A few weeks passed in a flurry of meetings, contract signings, and cautious optimism. By late spring, word spread that Innovatech Solutions had officially pulled out of the original development deal, forcing the partner company to redraw its construction plans. This time, Living Earth stood outside the lines slated for demolition. A spin-off non-profit, partially financed by Benjamin Gray's personal foundation, would hold the property title in trust. Ellie read the newly drafted agreement for the third time at one of the Daily Grind's corner tables. Her heart fluttered each time she scanned the paragraphs detailing the atelier's legal protections. Outside, the midday sun bathed Fremont's streets in a gentle warmth, as if mirroring her cautious relief. Benjamin was due to meet her there, but she arrived early to savor a quiet moment. She couldn't ignore the swirl of emotions that lingered each time she considered how close they'd come to losing everything. Yet a calmer undercurrent now flowed through her days, a sense that the worst had finally passed. Martha soon approached with a broad grin, setting down a latte in front of Ellie. "On the house," she whispered, winking. "You deserve a victory drink." Ellie traced the rim of the warm mug with her finger. "Thank you," she said softly, gratitude welling in her chest. "For everything. You stood by me through it all." Martha patted her shoulder. You would have done the same for me, I'm sure. Besides, this neighborhood needs living earth. I'm just glad it'll stay. Ellie glanced at the cafe entrance just as Benjamin stepped in, scanning the room until his gaze landed on her. His expression brightened, and he headed over, clad in a neat sport coat rather than his typical suit. He looked more relaxed, more approachable than ever before. "You're early," he remarked, folding his tall frame into the seat across from her. He gave Martha a polite smile in thanks as she refilled Ellie's water glass and discreetly moved away. Ellie set the agreement pages aside, trying to quell the small flicker of nerves that sparked whenever she and Benjamin found themselves alone. Despite the new understanding between them, the past still whispered in the corners of her mind. "I wanted to go over the final documents one more time. I need to be sure Living Earth is 100% safe." Benjamin nodded, leaning forward. "It is," he said firmly. "The trust guarantees that the building can't be sold or redeveloped without unanimous board approval, and you'll be on that board." She blinked. "Me? I'm not used to board positions." He offered a gentle shrug. "You helped galvanize this entire movement. It's only right you have a vote. Plus, you might be surprised how much your perspective matters to people." Ellie swallowed, touched by the faith he was placing in her. She skimmed the paper's key clauses again. Indeed, there it was in black and white, Ellie Parker, listed as a trustee. She felt a ripple of pride. Once upon a time, she'd been an observer in corporate circles, overshadowed and silent. Now, she'd have a say in decisions that affected the community she loved. "This is really happening," she murmured. "We won." Benjamin's eyes softened. "Yeah." "We did." A pause. Then he added, "By the way, the fallout at Innovatech wasn't as bad as I feared. Some board members threatened to walk, but our stock stabilized. Turns out the public likes the story of a CEO protecting local art spaces." Ellie exhaled relief. "I'm glad. I'd hate knowing you lost everything in the process." He reached across the table, hovering his hand just above hers in a silent question. She let her fingers slip into his, feeling the faint hum of connection. "You're worth risking a few business deals," he said softly. "And honestly, it's forced me to reevaluate the company's direction. We're shifting toward more philanthropic investments." Her heart fluttered again. There was a time she would have melted at such words, only to be disappointed later by a busy schedule or a missed promise. Yet now, she sensed he wasn't just saying what she wanted to hear. He was living it. Their days of false assurances had been replaced by visible, tangible proof of change. She slid the signed documents into a folder, lips curving into a small smile. "Thank you, Benjamin, for all of it." He gave her hand a gentle squeeze. Outside, the sun streamed over the Fremont streets, reflecting in the cafe's windows. Ellie lifted her latte, silently toasting to new beginnings. The path ahead still held unknowns, but the fortress of fear she once clung to felt lighter now. Together, they'd carved out a turning point, forging something stronger from the rubble of the past. With Living Earth's future secure, Ellie found herself in an unexpected position. The neighborhood began regarding her as a spokesperson for community arts. Requests for interviews trickled in, local podcasts, small newspapers, even an online magazine focused on civic engagement. Initially, she'd felt shy about speaking on camera, but after all she'd weathered, Ellie discovered a fresh confidence in telling her story. One afternoon, she welcomed a journalist named Harper into the atelier. Cameras rolled as Ellie guided them through the refurbished space. Sunlight poured through tall windows, spotlighting neatly arranged pottery and half-finished sculptures. The aroma of damp clay and acrylic paint hovered in the air. Harper, a friendly woman with curly brown hair and a bright blazer, followed Ellie's gestures with keen interest. Many people see you as the driving force behind saving living Earth. How does that feel? Ellie set a hand on a nearby work table. Truthfully, it was a team effort, she replied, voice calm. I might have organized the fundraiser, but without the community, people like Martha, Liam, and countless others, none of this would have been possible. Harper nodded, camera operator framing shots of the studio's creative details. Even so, you were integral in bridging the gap between corporate power and local activism. Any advice for others in similar battles? Ellie inhaled softly. She recalled her earlier self, once overshadowed in a marriage to a high-profile CEO, lacking a clear voice of her own. I'd say never underestimate the power of collective spirit, and don't assume someone with resources is automatically the enemy. Sometimes it takes dialogue to find a common ground. She stopped, choosing her words carefully. Also, you have to protect what you believe in, no matter how daunting the opposition seems. Harper jotted notes, eyes alight with fascination. And how has this experience changed you personally? Ellie paused, thinking back to how she'd molded clay late into the night, hoping to ease the knots of uncertainty in her heart. I discovered I'm stronger than I ever believed, she said simply. The obstacles forced me to speak up instead of staying invisible. I think a lot of us don't realize our own capabilities until our backs are against the wall. Finished with the interview, Harper thanked her warmly and left, promising to send a link once the piece went live. Ellie walked them out, waving at the camera operator, lugging equipment into the street. When she turned back, Liam emerged from behind a partition where he'd been painting. He wore a lopsided grin. Look at you, star of the Fremont art scene. Who'd have guessed? Ellie felt a blush creep up her cheeks. Don't tease me, she said, though her tone was playful. It's still surreal that people want my story. He shrugged, a genuine warmth behind his smile. You're changing lives by protecting this place. That's worth talking about. They moved toward the back, where half a dozen potter's wheels stood ready for the afternoon class. A few new students were expected, among them local high school kids wanting a creative outlet. Ellie felt a sense of fulfillment pulse through her. The small steps she'd taken, organizing events, rallying neighbors, even confronting a massive corporation, now allowed others to learn and grow in a safe, inspiring space. Liam and Ellie spent the next hour rearranging supplies, checking the kiln temperature, and setting up fresh blocks of clay. Occasionally, they exchanged laughter, reminiscent of simpler times before corporate threats and emotional turmoil. Despite the challenges, they'd preserved not only the studio, but their camaraderie. As Ellie finished labeling jars of glaze, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and found a message from Benjamin. Interview on local news tomorrow about Living Earth's new trust. They want both of us. Interested? Her chest fluttered, half from nerves, half from excitement. She texted back, sure. Let's keep telling the story. Setting the phone aside, Ellie caught her reflection in a small mirror propped near the workstation. She barely recognized the woman she'd been a year ago, skittish about attention and resigned to living quietly. Now she saw a steady glint in her own eyes, a fierce, gentle resolve that refused to go unnoticed. Ready to teach some clay molding, Ms. Celebrity, Liam joked, joining her by the kiln. Ellie answered with a light laugh and a self-assured nod. The voice she once buried was rising, carrying her to new horizons she hadn't dared imagine. And alongside that voice, a renewed sense of purpose guided her each step of the way. A few days later, Benjamin strolled into Living Earth with an unusual spring in his step. Gone was the aura of formal business attire. Instead, he wore comfortable sneakers and a simple button-down shirt. Several onlookers paused from their work, curiosity lighting their faces. Seeing the once intimidating CEO in a down-to-earth outfit left an impression on everyone. Ellie finished helping a beginner sculpt a bowl, then nodded her student toward the sink to clean up. Catching Benjamin's eye, she waved him over. "Decided to trade the boardroom for the pottery wheel today," she teased gently. He smirked, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'm trying something new. My foundation's board members suggested I get more hands-on experience with the projects we fund. And, well, you've invited me to try my hand at ceramics before, so here I am." Liam, passing by with paint-splattered towels, overheard and let out a friendly snort. "Better roll up your sleeves." Clay can be messy business. Benjamin smiled, accepting an apron Ellie offered him. "Messy I can handle," he said, though a slight apprehension flickered in his gaze. Ellie led him to a wheel near the large windows. Sunlight filtered in, catching fine dust motes drifting through the air. Bowls of water and slippery lumps of clay waited on the side. She gently guided his hands to the correct position, showing him how to brace his arms for stability. The movement felt intimate in its quiet simplicity, a far cry from the hectic swirl of corporate negotiations. He pressed the foot pedal, and the wheel began spinning. The clay wobbled perilously, splattering bits of wet earth onto his shirt. Benjamin's expression shifted from focused determination to mild panic. Ellie couldn't help a small laugh, placing her hands over his to steady the clay. "You have to keep it centered," she explained, her voice low yet encouraging. "Gentle pressure. Let the clay respond instead of forcing it. If your hands shake, the clay will too." He inhaled, attempting to calm the twitch in his muscles. Eventually, the mound smoothed into a mound of spinning earth, and a hesitant grin stretched across his face. "This is oddly satisfying." Ellie smiled. "It's humbling, right? Clay doesn't care about your resume or your bank account. You have to respect its nature." They continued, shaping the blob into a rudimentary bowl. Granted, it was lopsided, but Benjamin seemed genuinely proud. A small audience of living Earth regulars watched from a respectful distance, amused yet appreciative that he was stepping outside his comfort zone. Wiping sweat from his brow, Benjamin leaned back. "Never thought I'd be doing this," he admitted, glancing around at the vibrant swirl of paints, sculptures, and the easy camaraderie among artists. "I used to believe real power lived in corporate headquarters. Now I see it here too, in the way art inspires a community." Ellie's heart warmed at his candor. "It's a different kind of creation, but no less impactful." She remembered how dismissed she once felt in that fancy penthouse world. Now seeing Benjamin in her domain, genuinely invested, felt surreal. Setting the half-formed bowl aside, she handed him a damp cloth. "I can smooth it out for you later, if you want to keep it as a reminder of your first day as a potter." He nodded, a spark of mischief in his eyes. "Absolutely. It'll be my trophy for stepping out of my CEO bubble." Liam strolled over again, offering Benjamin a playful thumbs up. "Not bad for a beginner." He turned to Ellie, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. This easy banter, this blending of worlds, was something neither of them had expected a few months ago. As the evening approached, the studio filled with the gentle hum of spinning wheels, quiet conversation, and sporadic laughter. Benjamin pitched in wherever needed, moving tools, handing clay to novices, even grabbing an extra stool for a student with a bad knee. Ellie watched, equal parts astonished and grateful, seeing the man she'd known transformed by an openness that once seemed impossible. Yes, code and corporate might still define Benjamin's weekdays, but among clay-stained aprons and dusty floors, he embraced a new beginning that transcended old boundaries. And Ellie, guiding his hands on the wheel, realized she, too, was living a renewed chapter, forging art, forging relationships, forging a future on her own terms, yet finally allowing someone else to share that space without overshadowing who she'd become. A month later, Ellie received an email from a prestigious gallery in New York, inviting her to showcase several ceramic pieces in an upcoming exhibit. The event promised significant exposure for emerging artists, an opportunity she'd once only dreamed about. Reading the message, her heart pounded with an exhilarating mix of excitement and apprehension. That night, she called Benjamin to share the news. He listened intently, his words brimming with genuine pride. "This is huge, Ellie. You deserve it." Her excitement was laced with worry, though the exhibit runs for 3 weeks. "I'd have to be away from Seattle, away from Living Earth, for at least a month to prepare and stay for the opening." He paused before answering. "You know Living Earth can manage. Liam, Martha, and everyone else will keep it alive, and you can trust that I'll watch out for any further corporate threats." Ellie's chest tightened. In the past, traveling away from the city would have felt like a betrayal of her responsibilities. But she also realized she was no longer the anxious wife with no separate identity. She was an artist, invited to stand on a bigger stage. The following day, she shared the news at Living Earth. Liam's eyes widened. Then he swept her into a celebratory hug. "I knew it. Your work is amazing, and now more people will see that." Dawn clapped her hands, talking enthusiastically about how they should throw Ellie a send-off party. Even some local press offered to cover her journey, seeing it as a testament to Fremont's vibrant art scene. It felt surreal, but also right, like the natural next step in Ellie's evolving life. Before leaving, she spent hours carefully packaging her pieces, each wrapped in layers of protective foam. There were bowls etched with swirling lines reminiscent of ocean waves, vases featuring subtle geometric patterns, and a few decorative plates exploring themes of rebirth. As she worked, a swirl of excitement rushed through her veins. This was more than a trip. It was a statement of her independence and growth. On a clear Sunday morning, a week before the exhibit's opening, Ellie rolled a suitcase to the curb outside her apartment. Benjamin arrived in a sleek but modest car, another sign of how he'd begun simplifying his once ostentatious lifestyle. He helped load her bags, then drove her to the airport. In the passenger seat, Ellie watched Seattle's skyline shrink behind them, a tangle of nostalgia and anticipation knotting her stomach. She glanced sideways at Benjamin. "I can't believe how much things have changed," she said, voice quiet. "A year ago, I was just trying to stay unnoticed. Now I'm flying to New York for an art exhibit." He offered a warm smile. "You found your voice, Ellie, and it's a powerful one. Just don't forget us little folks back here when you're a big success." She laughed softly. "I doubt I'll ever be too big for Living Earth. That place is part of me." They reached the airport, and Benjamin parked. He walked her to the check-in area, where she carefully placed her boxes of ceramic art for shipping. There was an awkward moment as they stood near security lines, the overhead announcements blaring final boarding calls for other flights. Ellie took a breath, letting her hand rest on his arm. "Thank you for making me feel supported, not stifled. It's new and I appreciate it." He dipped his head in acknowledgement, his gaze tender. "I'm trying to learn from past mistakes. You deserve the freedom to pursue this." They stood there for a beat longer, the bustling airport crowd swirling around them. In the old days, Ellie might have clung to him, fearful and uncertain. Now, though, she felt steady on her own feet, her heart beating with a purposeful thrill. She leaned in, pressing a gentle kiss to his cheek. "I'll call you when I land." Benjamin's smile held pride and warmth in equal measure. "Go shine," he said simply. As she walked toward the security checkpoint, each step resonated with a sense of self-empowerment she hadn't known possible. The overhead lights reflected on the polished floor, matching the sparkle in her eyes. Heading off to New York with her art felt like the biggest leap of faith she'd ever taken, and she carried with her the certainty that home, living earth, and a promising second-chance love would be waiting when she returned. 4 weeks later, Ellie stepped off the plane at SeaTac Airport, exhaustion etched into her features after a whirlwind gallery showing in New York. Yet behind her tired eyes, a spark of triumph glowed. The exhibit had been a resounding success. She sold half her showcased pieces and received invitations for future collaborations. Critics praised her work's mix of delicate etchings and sturdy, grounded shapes, an apt reflection of her own journey. She couldn't wait to return to Seattle's familiar rhythm, free from the heady chaos of Manhattan. Once she cleared baggage claim, she spotted Benjamin waiting near the arrivals area. His face lit up as soon as he saw her, and a tender wave of relief washed over Ellie. This time, there was no tension, no cautious distance, just the comfortable ease of two people who had chosen to try again on healthier terms. In the car ride back, they caught each other up on all they'd missed. He described how Living Earth continued to flourish, thanks to new donations and robust community workshops. She recounted anecdotes of meeting fellow artists and curious collectors, describing how exhilarating yet nerve-wracking it was to see her name on a New York gallery banner. Approaching Fremont, Ellie rolled down the window, letting the crisp Seattle air fill her lungs. It felt indescribably good to be home. As they reached the daily grind, she insisted on stopping for a coffee, her first taste of Seattle brew in a month. Inside, the cafe's warm ambiance enveloped her like a soft blanket. Martha nearly dropped a tray of pastries when she saw Ellie, rushing around the counter to hug her. "Look at you, international artist," Martha teased, eyes gleaming. "We missed you, kid." Ellie laughed, hugging back. "I missed you all, too." Once they had cups of coffee in hand, Ellie's a simple latte, Benjamin's a black drip, they made their way to a corner table reminiscent of the day he first reappeared in her life. But now the tension was replaced by a sense of mutual respect and quiet tenderness. "So," Benjamin began, "what's next for you and your art, headlining galleries around the world?" She considered the question, sipping her coffee. "I do want to explore other opportunities," she admitted, "but I also want to grow what we have here. I love teaching at Living Earth, helping new artists find their footing. The buzz in that studio is irreplaceable." He nodded, sipping thoughtfully. "I get it. Being away from Seattle made me realize how much I value what we've built, the trust, the sense of genuine connection." She reached across the table, and their fingertips touched. "We'll figure out the balance," she said. "I won't stop pushing boundaries with my art, but I won't forget that my roots are here." Martha appeared then, a playful grin on her face. "Sorry to interrupt, lovebirds, but I wanted to bring you these." She set down 2 small pastries decorated with swirls of frosting that resembled clay patterns. "Congratulations, pastries, on a successful show and, well, on everything." Ellie's cheeks warmed. She thanked Martha, cutting into the pastry. The sweet icing burst with flavor, and she let out a small hum of delight. Benjamin smirked, clearly amused by her reaction. "Never tasted anything so good in New York," he teased. She shook her head, still smiling. "Not quite like Martha's baking, no." They lingered there, savoring the pastries in each other's company, the cafe's cozy hum a testament to how far they'd come. Their journey had been anything but straightforward, littered with old wounds, corporate showdowns, and fragile reconciliations. Yet here they were, sharing a moment that felt earned, something honest and anchored in trust. Ellie finished her latte, eyes shining with quiet gratitude. "There were times," she murmured, "when I thought second chances didn't exist. But now, I'm starting to believe we can keep rebuilding day by day." Benjamin linked his fingers with hers, his voice gentle. "We will," he promised, and so they sat, cups raised in a simple toast, no grand fanfare, just the comforting, steady hum of the daily grind around them. It was a moment both unremarkable and extraordinary, the perfect symbol of how second chances aren't about flashy beginnings, but about the quiet, determined choice to weave a new story together. Here, in the heart of Fremont, they'd found exactly that. A taste of a second chance, richer and more satisfying than either of them had ever dared hope. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.